Welcome back to Balance Patch Games. I'm Sam Pletcher. I'm alongside Jake Major, and it is time for Top Cut. You ready?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's do this. We've got John Lyons against Elena McFetridge, and we've got some fun teams coming up. Kind of a battle of the weather wars, except there's only one weather, and everybody likes sand.
Yeah. Definitely two interesting teams, very unconventional in terms of what I've seen, not just at our local events, but in general in this format. I mean, we'll have them on the screen for you. Oh, right there. John with a team of Salamence, which kind of was popular at the beginning of the format and then fell to the wayside in favor of other Pokemon. But nonetheless, a Salamence, an all-out offensive one, no support there. Annihilate with Spell Tag of all things, and Taunt, no Bulk Up. Just really interesting choices here, and I'm just curious to see how this team works out. You know, obviously the Sand, as you called out. We have Beat Up on Whimsicott for Annihilate, kind of a shout out to like 2011 times. And then Magmar with Follow Me and Clear Smog to be a pseudo hazer.
Yeah, and then, you know, the Salamence is interesting because we've seen the rise of Dragonite this regulation as a really popular Pokemon, and it carries that same exact dragon flying typing. However, one of the benefits of Dragonite is that it will have that multi-scale ability to be able to survive pretty much any one single hit, and then do things like set Tailwind, use Scale Shot. Salamence is the same in pretty much only the typing. It does none of those other things. It's got Intimidate to lower the attack stats of the other team, and this is a special attacking Life Orb set that John is running with Draco Meteor, Air Slash, and Heat Wave. So it'll be really interesting to see how he uses that Salamence as opposed to the Dragonite that I think are very common on a lot of teams this regulation. Yeah. Elena, on the other hand, she's got a much more standard team, I would say, in terms of you've got the Amoonguss, you've got the Incineroar, you've got a Sneasler, all Pokemon that are very common in this metagame. There's an Archaludon there with a Power Herb, Electro Shot, but also Stamina and Protect. You know, usually you see that Stamina alongside the Assault Vest, maybe some Rain. None of that on Elena's team. She's just got, the Power Herb to go for that immediate Electro Shot, and then hopefully power it up for some strong Draco Meteors and Flash Cannons.
Yeah. Corviknight, Garchomp without Sand, Archaludon without Rain. Classic Good Stuff's team, harkening back to the old days where, teams were kind of all archetyped, and then we called anything with just good Pokemon Good Stuffs, and this is really looking like that Good Stuffs, whereas John looking more like a Sand team. I think what that Salamence does provide, sorry to go back to John, I think what that Salamence does provide over Dragonite is the fact that John is running Tyranitar with Sand, doesn't have to deal with multi-scale, and can use Intimidate kind of to help out Excadrill and just have something to Earthquake next to while reducing that attack stat. I'm curious to see how Elena's team runs. Double Dragons is always cool. Corviknight, a very, very strong Pokemon, so Double Steel, Double Dragon, and then just classic good stuff with Incineroar, Amoonguss, and Sneasler, the Pokemon of the format.
Yeah, so here we go, starting the first round of top four. We're going to see Elena leading with the Sneasler and the Corviknight, John countering with the Whimsicott and the Annihilate. Elena's Sneasler threatens that coaching, which can really start to stack up boosts on the Corviknight. However, John can outscale Elena's boosts by a pretty significant magnitude with a side beat-up and Rage Fist. That spell tag that you called out earlier, not going to really help the Annihilate's bulk, not something like a Citrus Berry or a Leftovers, but what it does do is it increases Rage Fist's base power proportionally at 10% or at 20%. And if you're going to be stacking that up with Beat Up, then that percentage increase will increase as the Beat Up scales the Rage Fist. So Spell Tag could be doing a lot of work if John gets the Beat Up off with the Whimsicott.
Yeah. So Sneasler on Elena's side, threatening a Fake Out normally, but with this Whimsicott actually having Covert Cloak, going to be able to dodge that one. Would have been able to just hit it with a Dire Claw to get the KO, but John going for a Terrassalization and a Tailwind this turn, and a Taunt going out into the Sneasler before it can move, thanks to the Taunt. Doesn't allow coaching to go up, but Corviknight is strong enough on its own, does not need that +1 boost to its attack, is able to get the knockout, the one-hit knockout on that Annihilate.
Yet John really indexing to prevent the Sneasler from getting that coaching off, using 2 status moves in the Tailwind and Taunt to focus down the Sneasler. But what ends up happening there is Elena gets the attack off on the Brave Bird, enough to one-shot John's Annihilate while also preserving the Focus Sash on her Sneasler. So John's really going to have to make some headway with this Tailwind that he's got going on now, because he finds himself down a Pokemon after that first turn.
I really like that play from Elena. I think smartly knowing, okay, John, you have to go for one of these plays. If you Tailwind, that means your Annihilate isn't able to threaten as much damage. If you don't Tailwind, I'm going to either take out your Whimsicott, or if it Terras, do a good amount of damage and possibly status it. And if you just let me get a coaching off, my Corviknight is not going to go down to your Rage Fist. So Elena playing that turn 1 smartly, obviously stuck with the speeds and a taunt on Sneasler here, but I don't think she really cares about that as she lets Sneasler go down, and this Corviknight's probably free to do Corviknight things.
Yeah, the Sneasler had no way to protect itself in the first place because it doesn't carry the move Protect, and then it was already taunted, so it was kind of a sitting duck. And it falls to the critical hit Moonblast plus the Air Slash. Corviknight throwing out some really strong Brave Birds. I gotta think Elena's put a lot of attack into this bird, because it did more than half to Salamence, which is a fairly bulky Pokemon, all things considered, and it just one-shot an Annihilate, which also carries a lot of bulk. So this Corviknight of hers really doing a lot of damage with these Brave Birds, and kind of putting John on the back foot.
Yeah, surprised not to see John go for something like a Terra Fire, or just a Heat Wave there. Possibly thinking that Sneasler might not take enough damage from that, and I think making the right call there. I don't think it would have. Didn't have access to that Terra Fire, as I briefly mentioned, because Whimsicott has Terra'd this game. So Elena, interestingly, also not going for a Terra of her own on Corviknight there to potentially dodge a Heat Wave, and I would be shocked to not see a Heat Wave and a Terra come out on this very turn.
Yeah, John's actually got a lot of Fire-type damage threatening between the Heat Wave from the Salamence and then this Magmar that he brings out in the back. Corviknight deciding that it doesn't want anything to do with those Fire moves, and Elena brings out the Garchomp as her last Pokemon. Garchomp, of course, resisting Fire-type attacks. We also see a Terra coming out from her side. This must be the Amoonguss, which will, of course, give it a Fire-type resistance, and maybe let it put something to sleep.
Yeah, color me surprised. I mean, I really thought that Elena was going to lean into keeping this Corviknight on the field and going for that Terra Fire, but she's proving me wrong right here. Just going for a, I would have to assume a Spore, which is not going to work into either of these targets given Vital Spirit and Protect. But the Terra Water here and bringing in Garchomp, very, very good play. I believe there's one more turn of Tailwind, so Elena can probably just stall this out with a double Protect if she wants.
Yeah, it'll also be interesting to see, once that Tailwind gets reset, how these Pokemon are trained. Garchomp, of course, naturally outspeeding Salamence 102 to 100, would make the Garchomp the fastest thing on the field. But John, playing very smartly there, preserving his Whimsicott, allowing it to come back into the field possibly for a later Tailwind. So I think he still has enough offense left, you know, in his Pokemon to potentially pull this game back. But Elena has a full health Amoonguss, and when there's an Amoonguss, there's a way to mitigate a lot of damage that could come out from the opposing team's side. We see a Follow Me coming from the Magmar and a Rage Powder coming from the Amoonguss, so there's going to be lots of redirection here, and John Salamence will be the next Pokemon to attack. Air Slash into the Amoonguss does about 30-35%, and this Garchomp's going to come out with Dragon Claw into the Magmar and do about the same.
Yeah. And we see the Life Orb recoil there as the Tailwind does peter out. Garchomp, depending on how these Pokemon are trained, as we alluded to, this Garchomp likely going to be the fastest thing on the field, has the potential to be the fastest thing on the field. And I'm honestly surprised to see Garchomp just go for a Dragon move there and not try to get a KO on this Magmar with something like a Stomping Tantrum. Maybe wanting to let that Tailwind peter out and not let a free switch in to Whimsicott, which is very smart if that is what she was aiming to do.
Yeah, Magmar is once again going to follow me. So John really trying to keep this Salamence safe. Elena also going for the Rage Powder. So there's all this redirection war going on. Garchomp again going for Dragon Claw. Again trying not to go for the Stomping Tantrum and let the Whimsicott get a free switch in. Draco Meteor from the Salamence is going to do a lot more than Air Slash would, and that's going to knock out the Amoonguss. So very smart by John, playing it slow with the Air Slashes, trying to knock it down, and then making sure the big Draco Meteor comes out in the end to take it out. Now Elena's down to her last two Pokemon, and this Corviknight is going to come in against a Salamence that's at -2. So it's possible that, in fact, very likely that it's going to survive whatever attacks the Salamence is bringing out. I don't know if John has enough HP left in the tank, especially with this Whimsicott already having committed the Terra Water, so it's not going to resist something like an Earthquake. You know, Elena might have enough damage, spread damage coming out here to make whatever John's doing ineffective.
Yeah, John in a precarious position here. Salamence just went for a Draco Meteor. It's now -2 special attack. Doesn't have enough gas in the tank to probably pick up a KO on either of these Pokemon. Maybe with the Draco Meteor, but we do know that that Garchomp was confirmed to be the fastest thing on the field. Has to bring in Whimsicott to try to save Salamence, get its special attack back up, and maybe get a Tailwind. And goes for a Protect here, I think very smartly. But if an Elena can predict that and get this Whimsicott off the field, she doesn't. She goes for the Dragon Claw into the Magmar, which protected itself, and the Brave Bird as well, expecting this Magmar possibly to switch out, or maybe just to follow me. Maybe wanting to think, oh, he'll go for a Protect. And the Magmar doesn't have Will-O-Wisp on this team, so I'm curious about that targeting. But nonetheless, we are in a position where Whimsicott can get its Tailwind back up very, very safely.
Yeah,
and Magmar could throw out an Overheat into the Corviknight.
Absolutely, and that was key. John finding a way to bring the Whimsicott back onto the field. And I think the Garchomp was pretty safe to just go for an Earthquake in that position, because a Brave Bird targeted into the Salamence slot would have been a pretty key, it would have been pretty free damage. I guess Elena did have to guess which of John's Pokemon would switch out in order to give the Whimsicott the switch in, but the fact that the Salamence needed to reset the special attack drop was probably enough to clue in that it would be the Salamence side switching out. Now what you've got is the Salamence coming back in, and the Garchomp under Tailwind, or the Garchomp facing against Tailwind and staring down super effective Moonblast and a super effective Draco Meteor.
Yeah, very, very curious move there not to just go for either a Dragon Claw into the Salamence, which likely would have just KO'd thanks to Life Orb, and double it up with a Brave Bird. And if Whimsicott comes in on that slot, you might just get the KO and prevent the Tailwind from going up, which would win you the game if you are able to get that Tailwind off the field, because you don't have any inaccurate moves. And Corviknight could have gone for something like a Terra Fire plus a Roost. Sorry, no. The Amogus had gone for Terra Water earlier in the game. If it had gone for something like a Roost, or even that Brave Bird into the slot, I think that Elena would have been in a much more commanding spot in that game. But going into the Magmar, I'm very, very confused by that play.
Yeah, John did identify that he needed to find some way to switch that Whimsicott back in, and some way to keep the Magmar safe so that Elena couldn't focus down on one of those slots. So identifying that switch and protect was very well played on his end. As for Elena, she had that game definitely not won, but she had John on the ropes there, and letting the Whimsicott back in was the key, because John needed that speed control, and without the Whimsicott, if the Whimsicott couldn't find that entry, then the Garchomp was the fastest thing on the field and could have just cleaned house.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see next game, if the trainers switch up their strategies. Maybe, John goes into that sand mode after seeing, he kind of, Elena made a really nice play turn one, and that really kind of put her, got her out to a lead. And so John being able to crawl it back during the rest of that game makes it interesting to see if, Elena tries to make a little bit more of a read as well, game two.
Yeah, just want to backpedal on my own thought process. I was thinking that the Corviknight did have Terra Fire, as I said, so the play does make more sense, targeting down the Magmar, saying you have to clear the Magmar so it can't go for an Overheat into the Corviknight. Because I thought there was a Terra Fire, I thought it was a much more obvious play. But it did come down to, if Salamence had protected, you did need to take out Magmar before Corviknight moved. But I think preserving the Corviknight, or at least just not double targeting the Magmar, was the better play there.
Yeah, so we'll see game two starting right now. Let's see what both trainers lead, if we're going to see the same thing or something new. Elena leading Corviknight and Sneasler once again. She's going to keep things the same. And once again, for John, it's Whimsicott Annihilate. Let's see what happens this time.
Yeah, so we're poised to see something very similar. Both of these players could completely switch up what they want to do. The taunt didn't go very far on Sneasler last game. I mean, actually it kind of did. The coaching not going off on Corviknight there did keep it from getting a little out of control. I would love to see Elena kind of just lean into offense and go into this Whimsicott thinking that she can just pick up some KOs.
Yeah, her team is very well constructed. She's got enough of a defensive backbone and she proved it last game that she can survive 4 turns of Tailwind against whatever John wants to do. However, she couldn't survive 8. And so taking out this Whimsicott early on, when it doesn't have a move like Protect, when John's forced to commit the Terra into the Whimsicott, that might go a long way in the end game, making it a little simpler so that you don't have to worry about Tailwind. This time, we actually do see the coaching coming out in the Corviknight, so maybe there is a little bit more offense coming out from Elena's side. John going for the beat up instead of anything like a Tailwind. We may just see whether a 4-stacked Rage Fist with Spell Tag can take out a Corviknight that's at +1 defense. Do you know your Rage Fist calcs that well?
I don't, but we're going to find. I'm not going to have to, because we're going to find out in 3, 2, 1. Corviknight survives.
Corviknight survives, eats the berry. That's going to take it out of any sort of precarious recoil damage from Brave Bird. And I would imagine that a Brave Bird's going to be coming out here right into that Annihilate. No, it goes into the Whimsicott. And now this Annihilate is really scary because John can just set up Tailwind, and this thing's got a +4 Rage Fist. Watch out.
Yeah, I think we learned a lot from Game 1 where Elena was just able to take out the Annihilate, get it out of the way really early before it was able to get too scary. But now she's in a spot where it is very scary. And Rage Fist, even though it's at +2 defense on this Corviknight, I think this is going to be plenty to wrap up this Corviknight. And the Pokemon that probably gave John the most trouble last game, that Corviknight, is now completely off the field at very little. That Whimsicott took a lot of damage, but being a supportive Pokemon and having your offensive Pokemon at full HP, I don't see anywhere for Elena to run here.
Yeah, this is really, really dangerous. Whimsicott didn't even go for Tailwind last turn. Instead, really savvy play, encoring the Sneasler, knowing that the +1 defense from coaching, wouldn't really make a difference with all those Rage Fist stacks. And now, Elena showing that she changed things up and brought the Incineroar. That's just going to give Annihilate a Defiant boost. Makes it all the more curious why Annihilate wasn't targeted with the Brave Bird, because if you've got Incineroar in the back, you don't want to be forced to bring that thing out against the Annihilate. Whimsicott goes for Tailwind. Incineroar had no way to protect itself with the Assault Vest. That could just be close combat target. And the Sneasler is locked into coaching. It can't do a thing.
Wow. And that +1, +4-stack annihilates Rage Fist with Spell Tag, almost enough to KO Incineroar. Unsure why it didn't go for close combat here, possibly predicting a Terra Ghost. Yeah,
that's
probably predicting a Terra Ghost on Incineroar, as Flare Blitz actually knocks out Incineroar, of all things, not the Annihilate.
Yeah, now here comes Garchomp. Yeah, so that was my fault. It looks like the Annihilate on John's side. No, it does have close combat. So that would have been a clean OHKO on the Incineroar. Maybe John playing it safe, thinking maybe there's a Terra coming out here. No Terra from Elena's side. Instead, just a coaching into a Flare Blitz, which actually ends up taking out the Incineroar. And now you've got, once again, a Sneasler that can't do anything because it's been encored into coaching, and a Garchomp that, maybe the Rough Skin damage, I don't even think the Rough Skin tick will take out the Annihilate, and you've just got this helpless Sneasler where it can just be reset into an Encore lock if it somehow breaks this coaching Encore.
Yeah, Elena just throwing in the towel there. I think that game, or that turn 1 was very game-ending, unfortunately for Elena, thinking that maybe she could get away with something a bit cheekier, but unfortunately the dice not falling into position for her in that way, and John is able to just wrap it up immediately with a beat-up Rage Fist, and that's the power of the ape.
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where Elena played Game 1, at the very beginning of Game 1, exceptionally well, and when you take out a serious threat right away, sometimes you kind of underestimate how dangerous it actually is going into that next game. And I think, she realized, hey, this Annihilate didn't do too much to me last game. I'm not so worried. Maybe I'll just attack the Whimsicott, see if I can take it out. John still committing the Terra to the Whimsicott, being safe, keeping it alive from that Brave Bird. And, once John got that beat up off, it was curtains because that Rage Fist just did way too much damage for Elena's team to overcome.
Yeah. Even with that +1 defense, even with that +2 defense, just not even close to enough. And then after that, Defiant came in, the writing was already on the wall, but then it was written in permanent marker, It was over at that point, and unfortunately, Elena's tournament ends there. But John will be moving on to finals, playing that very, very well.
Yeah, strong run for Elena, but she is out in top 4, and we will see John Lyons in the finals after this.